introduce yourself?
Hey, so thanks for having me. I think anytime you can kind of reach out and see get more people involved and kind of maybe give some of these supports at a time when people need them, then we can sometimes catch that a little bit sooner. So then later when people get into really stress mode. So I've been at Carleton for about 20 years. I started worked in a variety of different departments, all with student services and in counseling in some capacity. So I was a career counselor for about 10 years, and then I moved on to health and counseling. Got into doing more psychotherapy. I'm a registered psychotherapist. My official title at Carleton is a counselor, working at health and counseling. And I've also had the pleasure of working at Paul Menton Center as a coordinator. So I've been kind of around and looked at all kinds of different places and how they work. So I might be able to work some of that, maybe if it's appropriate, into some of the questions today, just to give you guys some tips. So um, just a note, I think just one more thing just to kind of say is I got the questions in advance yesterday, so I had a chance to kind of think about them and put together some models or some things that we use a lot at health and counseling from different sort of approaches and that. So I've used the questions as a bit of a kind of a jumping off point to create a bit of a workshop, even though it's kind of a Q&A. So it may seem for some questions the answers might kind of get into a bit more in depth just because I thought it might be a bit more useful. There we go.
Aw- Awesome. Well, Grant, I will then start off with the first question.
Yeah.
So, what can I do to help myself? Also, these questions are submitted by students, so we're
Mhm.
excited to talk about them. So, to start off again, what can I do to help myself when I start feeling overwhelmed and anxious about school and life in general?
Okay. Awesome question. So start off, one of the models we often use to explain stress and sort of like what happens in a really simple way. If you want more information on this, you can look up Dan Siegel. He's done lots of research on this. He's a child psychologist in the States, and basically he talks about how our brain works, which is, if you think about it, it's kind of like it's useful, for having like stress or anxiety, because often the thing that really freaks us out is we don't know what's going on. We're just kind of reacting to a lot of body symptoms and stuff like that, which usually makes it worse. So I'll just kind of go through his model a little bit, and then maybe we might be able to use it a little bit. And I'll kind of walk you through a bit of an exercise so we can use this. Okay, so basically, he starts with, you can do this too if you want. Can't see anybody at home, so we can all look silly together if you want. So he starts off with sort of his hand model. And if we take your thumb and we just kind of fold it inward like this, and then we fold the top part down, this is basically a pretty accurate representation of sort of what your head brain looks like. So I say head brain because there's a lot of research now on sort of like neurons in the heart and in the intestine system too. So this is more sort of his head brain model. So basically, we've got down here, we've got our brain stem, which is our, like, that one goes back to about, 300 million years old, this part of our brain, which is right here. And that part basically is responsible for your breathing, your heart rate, hormones, metabolism, all the stuff that you don't have to think about that keeps you alive on a daily basis. And then this part, when we kind of fold this part in, this is like our limbic system. So the limbic system, you'd probably recognize if you've taken like first year psych, memory, motivation. For mammals, this is often thought of as the mammalian brain. This is what allows us to kind of care and connect with other people. Reptiles don't have that. They're terrible pets because they don't really, you can't really care for them, or they don't respond to that. So we've got this. These two parts of the brain here, what they do that's kind of interesting is that responsible together, they act to create emotions. And if we're folding over this part, this is the part that we have where cortex and our prefrontal cortex, um, cortex responsible for like map making, thinking, cognition, and the prefrontal cortex, this is often what we call like the smart part of our brain. So what happens is often if there's a threat, or if we like, think something like I'm going to get a bad mark on the exam or all this kind of stuff. We kind of say we flip our lid, and it's like all this kind of stuff gets disconnected. So when you flip your lid, we've all had that experience. I work with people like that on a daily basis. When somebody calls in for a walk-in appointment, they're usually like this. So they're pretty stressed, speaking really fast. They're trying to give me lots of information, and they're just kind of, really they're upset about stuff, which is really normal and natural, at this time of year. But as as Osman said, even in this time that we're living in. Okay, so the idea with this sort of model, how we use it, is like, how do we get this back online? Because if you're talking about right now, if you're wanting to study, you want to retain information, you need this part of the brain. Like, you need your memory, you need all of that stuff. And the prefrontal cortex joins all of it together. So there's a really simple way that you can get it back online if you kind of lose it. And I walk people through this all the time. So basically what we can do, the first thing is we're going to do a little trick on this part, because if you remember the part here, which is our brainstem, that's also responsible for breathing, right? So we can do a little trick that kind of tricks this into thinking that we're not we're not flipping out, we're not wigging out. And the basic way that we do that is we start to just naturally take your hand, put it on your navel, and take a deep, imagine just breathing down into your hand. And what you're noticing is just following the breath. It's just one breath. If you can just follow it, the beginning, middle to the end. Just try this out and just get a sense for it. So you can just kind of feel, if you're doing it right, you'll feel kind of like your whole stomach, kind of your lower abdomen just kind of expand outward like that. So when we're stressed, we do the opposite. We tend to like go really tight, and the breath does not get down there. So there's lots of research on this. I won't bore you with it. I know polyvagal theory kind of talks about this too, but if we're trying to get this back online, one of the quickest ways we can do this is through the breath, which is like drop the breath really low in the belly, and then just do a quick body scan, just from the top of your head, shoulders, notice the jaw. Just what you're looking for is tension. Once you find tension, you can squeeze it a little bit more if you want, and then just kind of release it, just to notice what it feels like to let go of that. So you're using the breath, and then you're also just kind of scanning down the body, just searching for some tight spots. Once you find one, let it go. And you can even notice, you can probably even notice what my hand's doing as I'm doing this myself. Like, it's starting to kind of close as I start to relax even more. So that's basically it. Like, we're tricking this part that thinks we're in distress, because often, like, this part, this limbic system, it has all kinds of false alarms sometimes, like when you're in class and you get a false alarm and there isn't really a fire. Well, we have this system that kind of does this all the time, right? It's like, it's not really a danger, but it's saying like, whoa, there's a threat here. Like, if somebody looks at you funny, and you interpret that a certain way, that can be a threat. If your prof says, please sit down, be quiet, that can be kind of a threat. So, but we're not really in danger. This stuff isn't really like threatening. But the way we can do this is just, let's get this back online. So right now, it's like you're studying, you're busy, you guys are like trying to do all kinds of stuff. That can be a helpful tip, just to get the smart part of your brain back online, so you can focus and study and do what's really important to you. So that is that comes from the work of Dan Siegel. So if you're curious about that, any folks in psychology or want to learn more about that, you can Google and YouTube him. Got a lot of really interesting research. Okay. And if there's any,
Yep, just wrote his name in the chat, by the way, everybody.
Oh,
if
cool.
you want to find it and learn more.
Awesome. As I go through here, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to be like, I was extremely engaging. I was sort of just doing it myself.
Cool. All right. I always invite that. I mean, I'm up here kind of talking and it's like, pop, pop, pop. But I always try to kind of get things kind of more dynamic and kind of like, so we can test stuff out. Because if you can test it out, there's more of a chance you're going to be able to use it when you need to. Right? So that's one thing you can do. So those are some tips. Like if you start feeling overwhelmed, you can do that. The other one I was going to do something really quick. We use this a lot, right? Because if somebody comes in and they're really in like a stressful kind of place, we do something called dropping an anchor. So dropping an anchor, like kind of like caught up in these like internal storms, you know, the anxiety and stress and worry and fear and all this kind of stuff. What we can do sometimes, we can drop an anchor into the present moment because a lot of anxiety is in the future. It's like worst case scenario thinking in the future. And we often underestimate a lot of our resources and ways that we've handled this kind of stuff in the past. One of the things we can do, again, to kind of come back to the present moment where that's where all of our resources are, you can do this exercise called dropping an anchor. Try this one out. You can do this one too. This is another one you can do at home. You press your feet into the floor. Just really plant them. So bring all of your mindful awareness and your attention to the floor and just feel like the pressure, feel any sensation, feel anything like that. Just feel the connection, like you're almost like rooted to the ground. Okay, so you're not going anywhere. You're right here. And then what you can do is you can start to notice, okay, what's my mind telling me? The mind's like a radio that never shuts up. It's always saying stuff to us, predicting. Most of the stuff is usually negative. So these are kind of like these emotional storms. So we can kind of drop an anchor, you know, stay connected to the present moment. And we don't have to change anything. We can just let that be there. Because a lot of it's thoughts. It's like it's our mind telling us stuff. It's a bunch of words, you know, in a sentence that conveys some kind of meaning. You can just kind of like let that be there. And just kind of drop an anchor without changing anything, without trying to change anything, and just kind of wait until the storm passes. It's more of a mindfulness way of kind of working with stress sometimes. That can be kind of helpful sometimes. We don't have to change the thoughts in order to focus in and work on a project or study for an exam. We usually have to get rid of it. A lot of these third wave kind of mindfulness approaches, the thing that they have in common is we're trying to change our relationship to the stuff that's showing up, like negative thoughts and feelings. One of the ways we can do that, just drop an anchor in the present moment and just kind of like watch the storm and just notice what's there until it passes. That's another way we can do that. If there's any questions, if people are kind of like, what I would encourage, we're going to leave them to the end, but it's like, if I'm saying some stuff and it kind of like, it, you know, excites your curiosity or you go, okay, that's kind of interesting, I want to learn more about that, just kind of make a note on it and you can ask me at the end of the workshop. Okay.
Awesome. I think, Grant, are you ready to move on to the next question then?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much for that very in-depth first question. That was great. I was sort of going along with it, you know, too, sort of trying it, putting my legs down, moving a bit back, you know, trying to relax, sort of falling down to my navel. I was refreshing. Yeah. So question 2, what are some tips for staying engaged in school and careers during an active global crisis?
Okay. In some ways, it's like it's quite unique, and in other ways, it's sort of, it would be the same way. You know, we could answer the question. It would be the same way as if there wasn't a global pandemic or crisis. So for this one, can I use you as a bit of a demo for this? Okay, so I'll show you something we can work with here. It's easier to do it sometimes than it is to talk about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I got a little pad here, and what we're going to do together is I'm just going to kind of guide you through an exercise. So if you've got like a piece of paper and a pen, we can kind of do it together here. Awesome.
All right.
Okay. Okay, so this is sort of the big picture answer to that question. So instead of kind of answering with words, I'm going to kind of just do a little exercise that can kind of show us sort of how we might be able to approach this. Or if you're working with me, like in counseling, this might be how I might approach that question if somebody came in with that. That's a big question. Okay, so at the top, I'm drawing an arrow, and it says 5 senses experiencing. And I'm just putting experience, like just EX for short.
You said 5-sentence experience?
5 senses.
5 senses.
Yeah. So everything that you can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell.
Okay. Awesome.
5 senses. Okay. Now, do you happen to have a pen?
Yeah.
Right. Got a pen? Okay.
Yep.
Now, what I want you to do, keeping that in mind, is I want you to go through the pen with your 5 senses. So I'll guide you through it. So we're going to see the pen. So just notice that. We're doing some mindfulness here. You can hear the pen. Give it a tap. Notice what that sounds like. You can feel the pen. You can smell the pen if you want.
Smells good.
Don't taste the pen. That would be unsanitary. Well, what we're going to do then is I'm going to draw an arrow to the bottom, and I'm just going to put at the bottom, I'm going to put mental experiencing. Okay, so it looks like that. There we go. All right. Now, if you put the pen away, I just want you to just do the bottom exercise, which is mental experiencing. So do the same thing, only with your mind. So see the pen, hear the pen, feel the pen, smell the pen, because it's in your mind. You can taste the pen if you want. Okay, now, you notice any differences between the 2 experiences?
Yeah, I couldn't really experience the mental one really that much.
Okay, all right. So you notice some differences. That's excellent. So then what I would like you to do is think of a time when you're moving towards somebody that you really care about. You know, like somebody that's in your life that, you know, maybe a good friend, a partner, whatever, somebody that you care about. And notice how that feels, like to actually move towards them. Now let that go and think about something that you're afraid of, that you would actually want to move away from. Okay, now again, do the same exercise, mindfulness awareness. Just notice the differences, if you're aware of any differences between how it feels to move toward and then how it feels to move away.
It feels like, I don't know, it feels more warm when you feel like you're going towards something like you, I guess, like and stuff.
Okay.
And then it feels a little more scary and fearful when you think about something you're more scared of and stuff.
Absolutely.
Like it felt more like noticeable when I felt the fear aspect.
Okay, great noticing. This is awesome. Okay, you're an excellent demonstration subject. Okay, so what that gives us is it gives us these 4 different quadrants, right? So it gives us kind of like noticing the difference between the outside world, our inner world of private experience, how it moves, how it feels to move towards something that's important to us, how it feels to move away from some unwanted or adversive experience. So what we can do, you know, I normally take sometimes a half an hour or a session to kind of do this, but we could do it really quick just to give you a sense of this. If you gave me one thing and I asked you who or what is important to you, what would be one thing that you would put in quadrant 1 right now?
I don't want to be too vague and say family, so I'll say sister.
Sister. Okay. Okay. Now, sometimes people say sisters, sometimes people say family, sometimes people say school, sometimes people say their future. All of these things are like, they're great samples. Now, quadrant 2, the away quadrant, what we're noticing here is like, okay, what sort of inner obstacles have you noticed show up that might get in the way of your sister? So this is going to be like usually like our thoughts, our feelings, our urges, our emotions, sensations, all that kind of stuff. What would be something in quadrant 2 you'd feel comfortable sharing that
Mhm.
that would be an inner obstacle that gets in the way?
Think fear of think maybe fear of failure.
Okay.
So that sometimes gets in the way because it makes you do decisions that are like not necessarily healthy for you, like maybe studying till 6, 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You just went to quadrant 3. Okay. So you've done this before.
Somewhat in my mind.
Excellent. All right. This is kind of what we were going with this model, is a way of kind of thinking about things that gives us kind of a mindful awareness so we have more choice in our life. Okay, so basically what you said there is like, I get this fear of failure, right? So I just drew a little movie camera up here in quadrant 3. So what you just said then is, if I'm acting under the influence of that, that's basically the question in 3, is you would like stay up till like 6 in the morning doing something. So that's kind of if you're acting under the influence of fear of failure, right? Okay. So put in 3, stay up till 3 or 6 in the morning. Stay up till 6 a.m. That's what we got in quadrant 3. Okay, quadrant 4. Quadrant 4 is what sort of things, so it's a flip side of 3. So quadrant 4 is what sort of things could I do or do I do? Or what's the smallest, tiniest, easiest step towards who or what is important to me down in quadrant 1?
um, and it's the five senses one, so it's more physical, I'd say, right?
Yeah, so this would be
Oh,
like observable behaviors that we could see on a movie camera.
oh, awesome. Like maybe like a quick little text or a hug.
Okay. So basically what you got there is a point of view. This comes from a third wave approach called ACT, Acceptance Commitment Therapy. And basically, if you like the big picture, this is a great kind of point of view to work from, because the main skill here is if we can notice sort of what's going on, it gives us more choice in our life. So from a lot of the research that we've done, okay, so going back to the question, like how do I stay engaged in school and in a global pandemic? Basically what we're talking about is like, what's important to you, like in quadrant 1, like what's the stuff in your life that matters to you? Now, whether it's a global pandemic or not, there's going to be stuff internally. Like the global pandemic is kind of up here, right? That's in the five senses experiencing. We can have lots of thoughts about, like loneliness, or it's like I can't go out, or it's like I can't connect with people, and there can be all kinds of thoughts that can kind of get in the way of what's important to us. So part of what this approach looks at is like, it develops a way to kind of notice when we're getting hooked and doing kind of living on the left hand side of the away moves. So we can kind of do things to kind of make this a little bit more easier to kind of live a rich, full, meaningful life, or in DBT they call a life worth living, something that's just like important to us. So this is sort of a way that we can do this. We use a framework. I do personally use a framework like this a lot, working with people when they come in with types of like existential issues, meaning in life type issues. But it'll work for anything. This approach has been used to be effective with like depression, to anxiety, to even like working with people with schizophrenia. So it's kind of a neat little one. So if you're curious about that, again, a lot of these answers are just kind of like tip of the iceberg
Mine right there.
answers. I realize that it's hard to do this without kind of getting into therapy or that. But these are sort of like little ways we can kind of think about this. It's like noticing, am I moving towards, or am I moving away from stuff that's important to me? In this pandemic, it's like at this stage, it's like so many people are getting caught up. Well, like the loneliness is so predominant, you know, and it's like when we act under the influence of that, it's like we often usually end up withdrawing more, when it's like loneliness is a signal that we need to connect with people. You know, relationships are important to us in our life. So that kind of an approach can be useful to kind of notice sort of which direction we're going in and how to get back on track. Yeah. Okay. I'm spending a bit more time on these questions because they're really important. Some of the other questions I think are going to be a lot shorter, my answers. So I am keeping track of time, just to let you know. All right.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. They're great. Those two questions are great two questions, especially because they're showing like actual methods to deal with it. I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, right? About your
Okay.
mental health at the end of the day. And if we have any sort of tips or tricks that can work, like in some cases, almost really quickly, if it's whether it's just, planting your feet down, taking a deep breath,
Yeah.
it's important for students to know. It's important for anyone to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you think that too. All right. Only other thing I would mention is just to keep an eye on these things, because sometimes these can become our away moves in quadrant 3, and they work in the short term, right, to make us feel better. But if we keep using them, they tend to backfire and they tend to kind of make our life worse. So from DBT, they talk about these set of factors called vulnerability factors, and I'll go through them with you. So one vulnerability factor is, we're talking about physical illness. So if we're sick, if we're tired, this kind of thing, that can make us more vulnerable to negative moods, like depression or anxiety, and that kind of thing. I'll just hold these up here, just trying to see. So that's one. So another one is like eating, right? So if we're eating too much or too little, or we're calling Uber Eats, or like a lot of a lot of takeout and that kind of thing. A lot of people notice that, it's like, I feel horrible after this. I've got no energy to do anything or study or anything. Another thing, of course, alcohol or drugs. Again, this one, used in moderation, not a big deal. But if we start to kind of depend on it to make ourselves feel better, that can increase our vulnerability to like negative moods. Sleeping, so people notice like not enough, too much. This is another thing. A lot of studies kind of link depression and sleeping together. Again, not any of these types of things, and stress would be another one. Exercise. So a lot of people, I think, kind of know this stuff, like they've heard about it, but just to kind of underline it, it's really important, because a lot of things, students that I'm talking to, they've got such a narrow focus, because the down in quadrant 1 of their matrix, school is really important to them, but they're almost like it's the only thing that they're doing, right? So one of the things we talk about is like, in order to kind of, if you think of stress as being like on a teeter-totter, and it's like, if there's just so much focus and so much weight on the stress, and it's kind of pulling it down this way, in order to balance that out, what a lot of people do is they try to work harder, right? Or the example you gave, like I stay up to like 6 in the morning, and I'm just like, and then that affects the sleep and leads into all kind of vulnerability factors. So one of the things we can do is think about this sort of acronym, the 4 R's. So a way to kind of balance out that teeter-totter and kind of balance it out a bit is we think about things like the 4 R's stands for rest, recreation, reflection, and what's my other one here? Recreation, what did I say? Rest. Give those again here. Reflection, there we go. Rest, recreation, reflection, and did I get all 3 of those there, or 4?
I believe that was 3.
I haven't had enough sleep here myself. Okay. If I missed one there, I'll come back and give that to you later. But those ones are really important just to balance it out, because a lot of times what I'm hearing in terms of people's self-talk, right, is that they don't have enough time. So if you think about it, sometimes if we follow that thought and we go, okay, what would happen if if I go along with that thought and I buy into it? Usually people end up working harder and they stay up later, and they're not putting sort of any, to use a car metaphor, they're not putting any gas in the tank, to kind of keep running, to keep running the car. So these things, even though our mind is saying, no, you got to keep going, you got to keep going, that stuff is incredibly important. So those R's, if you think about those. Yeah. Okay, I think that I'm ready to go on to the next question. I'll move through this a little bit faster.
Awesome. No, those two questions are extremely important again.
Okay.
So number 3, what are some signs of depression? Personally, I know for me, I sleep a lot whenever I'm kind of sort of down in the dirt.
Yeah,
I'll just feel like I can't get out of bed. I'll just
yeah,
stay in bed, watch a movie.
yeah,
That's my telltale sign
yeah,
usually. Don't know if I have any really other signs that I notice personally, but maybe others do notice, but definitely just staying in bed and sleeping in.
yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there, actually, because it's like if you're noticing sort of, that's a lot what we teach, right? Is to kind of like notice what your signs are. So if you notice sort of what your quadrant 3 moves are, your away moves, that kind of gives you like a bit of a wake up call. You at least kind of know, okay, am I starting to go down the rabbit hole here? So sleep is definitely one. Um, you're usually looking for changes, things that are kind of like out of the norm, so like too much, too little sleep. Some other ones are like losing interest in stuff that used to give you like, a lot of joy, so kind of like the interest and your passion for the things that you used to love kind of drains away. I mean, that can be a sign. Things like, as you said, like withdrawing from people, or like if you go into your room, sometimes we don't text people, we don't reach out, we don't see people, we don't do those Zoom calls or anything like that. Other things can be eating can be a sign, like we start eating too much. With a fellow, and he was depressed, he put on about 30 pounds, in a couple of months. And so you get sort of like these marked changes, in different areas like that. Those can be signs. Of course, like if the mind starts going to like suicidality, like thoughts like I'd be better off not here, or I wish I could, not wake up tomorrow morning. You start having thoughts of killing yourself. It's usually a sign, person's they're low mood and they're having a lot of symptoms and a lot of trouble that way. So with that, like if a person's like concerned about that, or if they want to check it out, they can always sort of book what's called a mental health assessment appointment with their family physician. So if a person has a family physician, we always encourage them to go and continue speaking with them and working with them. If they don't, though, if the student doesn't have a family physician, they can come and use one of our doctors at Health and Counseling and ask for a mental health assessment.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, definitely some signs of depression are very noticeable and some aren't, obviously, as you can like you sort of explained to us right there. Uh, so the next question, what are some tips for dealing with school/workplace burnout?
Workplace burnout. Was that the question?
Yeah, so dealing with school and workplace burnout.
Okay. So burnout isn't like, it's not really like a medical diagnosis or a medical condition, right? So it's kind of like there's a lot of sort of different ways to look at it. Some people think of it more as like, some research thinks of it more as like a workplace stress, right? There's other experts that kind of look at it and say, well, it's not really burnout. It's probably more depression that's kind of going on there. But the way, I guess the way I usually approach it is I use sort of like to get it sort of like, what's the symptom telling the person, right? So I use this metaphor sometimes. Kirk Strozahl, who's one of the founders of acceptance commitment therapy, uses this a lot. And he says, if you've ever been driving a car, and most people have had this experience where you're driving along and then all of a sudden you see this little engine light or some light on your car dash just starts flashing at you. And usually the the instant human reaction is like, oh man, I don't want to look at that. It's like, how much money is that going to cost me? So we just kind of like ignore it, and sometimes we might even, if it's really bothering us, we might even kind of take a piece of tape and kind of like cover it up. And we kind of treat our emotions that way too, particularly negative emotions. Usually like with something like, depression or anxiety or burnout, whatever we want to call it, we usually kind of like cover it up, and then we don't want to look at it until, it gets worse and there's other things that start going wrong, So emotions, like some therapists, like, or some schools of therapy, like emotion focused therapy, a lot of their research is on like, what's the value, like the signal value, from an evolutionary point of view in emotions. So they usually give us like really quick information about sort of the outside world, but they also give us information about the stuff that's important to us in our life, So in that matrix that I was showing you, quadrant 1, our emotions are going to give us a lot of feedback. If something is, we've got a question coming up here, like on work-life balance, right? It's like if we don't have work-life balance, or if our life feels unbalanced, we're going to notice it in our feelings. Like we're going to have usually some pretty strong feelings showing up. And, usually what we do in counseling is we kind of go, can we, is it okay if we kind of peel the tape off there a little bit, kind of see what this is trying to tell you? Because it's usually a signal that something is like kind of going sideways or south in your life, and so we use it as kind of like a signal. We talk about this stuff. So whether it's depression, whether it's burnout, whatever you want to call it, it's usually a signal that something's not going well in your life, and we can open up a conversation and kind of explore it to figure out what that is and see if we can get it back on track.
Sure. Yeah. No, I didn't even know that, like those studies about burnout. I always thought it was just like you're just done with work, done with school, just tired sort of thing. I never even thought of like past it. So that's pretty interesting to like look at.
It definitely could be. Yeah. Like it could be a lot of different things, so that's why usually, I love these questions. They're great questions. What I was saying before, it's like you can answer them kind of like just little kind of tips and the tip of the iceberg. When you're actually kind of doing therapy or counseling with somebody, you're going pretty deep to get a sense of like use the car metaphor. It's like, what's going on under the hood here? That engine light is telling you is kind of off.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll go to our next question then. And this is definitely a great question, not just generally for this season, but just generally, like not even generally, specifically for this year. As we mentioned, this year is a little more of a lonelier year for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
How can I keep my seasonal depression from ruining my motivation?
All right. Great question. I have a little diagram I whipped up for that one.
So,
okay. So I'll use this as a bit of a framework. So there's a psychiatrist. His name was William Glasser. So some of the psych majors might kind of be familiar with this sort of model. So he talked about sort of this, he uses this car analogy, right? And he would say, all of the architecture and industrial design students, don't criticize my drawing here. I'm doing the best I can. This is like a top-down view of a car. So each one of these represents the different wheels on your car, right? So at the top we have thinking and doing. And then the bottom wheels, we've got feeling or emotions and physiology. So if you're talking about like, what can I do? So depression doesn't start impacting sort of like the momentum, right? Or the motivation, to keep me kind of moving, then we can address like any one of those, right? So we can address kind of the doing aspect. So usually we'll have a conversation with a person like, so if you had this before, like what sort of things do you do, when that time of the year rolls around? Just checking this. This question was about the seasonal depression, was it?
yeah.
There was a couple of questions on depression. So okay.
Yeah, there's other questions, but this is more so focusing on like seasonal depression.
Seasonal. Okay, awesome. Okay. So then in terms of doing, I mean, some people will kind of go to their family doctor. They'll have sort of like an assessment looking at like their nutrition, looking at their vitamins, looking at things like, because with the lack of sunlight, vitamin D, there's all kinds of usually vitamin deficiencies, so we can look at it sort of that way. That would be sort of doing and physiology. So we're looking at kind of the physiology part of that aspect of ourselves. Some people would actually kind of, they'll go and they'll purchase like satellites, so because there's a lack of light, in the amount of daylight, they'll actually sit in front of that. And some people have reported that that's really helpful for them, So if there's things that a person's done that have worked for them, I'd suggest, try that, keep doing what you're doing. But then we can also do things like, there's therapy, there's basically where we're looking at, are there certain types of thought patterns? Do they need to kind of like hold sort of like difficult feelings? Are there skills like acceptance skills or things like that that can make it easier to kind of be with this stuff, even though, you're in Canada, it's cold, it's dark, and it's like, yeah, for sure, I'd rather be somewhere else too. Like, I'd love to live in a hot desert somewhere at this time of the year. But if we can't change it, then okay, how do we work with it? How can we kind of change our minds with it? So that's sort of some of the stuff that we do in counseling and therapy, sort of like reframing and finding things that work a little bit better. Of course, I mean, if there's you can always do that. You can book with one of your family doctors. Again, you could do a mental health assessment. Sometimes people, not always, but sometimes people will go on sort of like a low level sort of medication trial temporarily, I have a couple of students that were doing shared care with some of the docs, and they just, they found like the thing that works better for them is like to go on just a kind of a low medication dosage, antidepressant, just for that time of the year. So just something that could kind of boost and provide a bit of support. So on that car diagram, there's like so many different areas that you can target. The doing part's important too, because often we stop doing things, when things get cold or dark and we're not as active. And when we're not as active, our mind usually becomes more active. So,
Yeah.
that's
No,
a couple of
awesome.
ideas on that.
Yeah, no, awesome. Actually, like I know you mentioned the satellite and stuff. Actually, just got one, so excited to try it out for the first time. I feel like
Cool.
obviously it's a different year for everyone generally. So what, try different
Yeah.
things. My opinion right now, and what works, as you said, for you in the past, you should keep it up because we know it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tried and tested. Yeah.
So the next question is actually similar to the school and workplace burnout question that you mentioned. So you sort of kind of answered it, but I'll just, reiterate it, ask it again. How
Okay.
can I maintain a healthy school, work, personal life balance?
Okay. So your feelings are usually going to tell you that. So number one, when people come in and like they're usually the presenting complaint is they feel bad. They're usually feeling bad for a pretty good reason. So what I'll often say to people is like, what if you're, we use kind of a little trick from Gestalt psychology. And we say, if that feeling like had a little voice and they could speak, what would it be saying to you right now? It's amazing what people come out with when you ask them that question. It sounds like a completely like crazy question, but it's really interesting when they start saying, maybe it would tell me, I need to do more of this, or I need to kind of reach out to my friends more. Or I need to, be more active, or I need to change my major, or, I'm just not happy with the path I'm going on. Again, there's such a signal value in feelings that we don't often listen to, because in our culture, we're just kind of motivated to kind of feel bad, get rid of them. And again, back to the check engine light in your car, there's a lot of signal value in the feelings. The other thing we can do, if people are interested, you can do like these types of assessments and stuff online. I'll pull this up. I'll see if you can see it, hopefully. We'll see here. So this is it's a dartboard. Okay. I don't know if you can you read the print on that, or do you want me to read it?
So I could read it. So work, education, leisure, personal growth, health, and relationships.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, so for example, if I'm doing an intake with somebody or a first consultation, and I want to get a sense of sort of like the presenting problem and how it's impacting different areas of their life, I'll use something like this. But it's you can use this yourself, like even just to kind of assess and just kind of see, okay, what's my level of balance in these different areas? So if you think of it like a dartboard, right? And in darts, you got closer to the center means, that's a great score. And further away, it's like, okay, you're kind of off the mark there. If you think of these different areas and you were to mark an X in each one of these different quadrants that represents where you stand today in each one of those different areas, you'd get kind of like a quick assessment on balance, like in terms of like how close am I to kind of my goals or to what's important to me in my life in these different areas. So for example, if somebody's like relationships are really important to them, but it's like they kind of put the dart down here, it's probably a sign that they're not living the stuff that matters to them. They're not kind of doing those toward moves towards the stuff that's important to them. So that can be a quick little way that you can get a quick assessment, kind of in a cognitive way, just kind of looking at, so what are these different areas that are important in my life, and like, am I kind of on point with them? That can be one way you can do it. It's a quick
Amazing. You said
little.
it's called is it called a dartboard? That's what you
Yeah,
called
this
it?
one is called. It comes from a. You can actually, you could get this off if you want to go to the website. Russ Harris. So Russ
Mhm.
Harris, and it's from his book called Act Made Simple. So Harris is a GP psychotherapist, works and lives in Australia, and he's sort of one of these third wave guys. So this is sort of a bit of an assessment he uses to get a sense of really quick, it's really fast, just sort of like how on point are people are they, and kind of living their values in these different areas of their life.
Awesome. So, and you said it's Act Made Simple by
Act Made
Russ.
Simple by Russ Harris.
Russ Harris. Awesome. I
Yeah,
will just
and it's
drop
from
that in the chat just in case people would like to read that. There's
okay,
the Amazon book that I found right there. But
yeah,
if you can support local, support local.
yeah.
Awesome. So on to the next question. This is an interesting question that we got from the crowd. We're gonna rephrase it, reword it a little bit, but we're gonna read the actual question. Is it weird to eat ice? Yeah, that is the question. Is it weird to eat ice? So the thing that we wrote a little bit more detail on is maybe developing habits, tics triggered by anxiety and stress, and how to cope with these. So that's
Yeah.
sort of the more elaborate, sort of in-depth question. But is it weird to eat ice?
Well, I happen to enjoy a good ice cube every now and then. Okay, so to get to the way that I was approaching this question is talking about a little bit on um, any behavior. Like if you look at any behavior, there's some kind of a purpose that it serves. So even stuff that on the surface you'd look at and you'd go, man, that's weird, or that's like undesirable, or it's like I wouldn't want to do that, or whatever. There's some kind of a function in it if you were to do like I'll show you how to do a quick behavioral analysis on this. But if you get down and you do sort of like an ABC analysis, you'll always find it makes sense. Some way, somehow it makes sense. But on the surface, it just doesn't looks, maybe it doesn't. So if you want to know really quick, you can do something like, you can do this yourself. I've done this over the phone with people, not even kind of seeing them, right? And I just say, just if you take a page and you just draw like 3 columns, just so it looks like that. And then you just put in column 1, you put A, column B, column 2, you put B, and then column C, you put C, column 3. You just like put the behavior right in column B. So if we had the example here, eating ice. And again, folks at home, you can sub in your own behavior, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. This would be the way that you could do this. Okay, so you put in eating ice. And then The A, so that's behavior. The A stands for antecedent. So an antecedent is something that comes before, right? So if you think about like watching a Netflix video or movie, and on the bottom you've got that little timeline, you know, with that time bar, and you can kind of move things back in time or forwards. That's kind of what you're doing with this exercise. So you're putting in, think of a time and you did that, and then kind of like drag that little rewind dot backwards. So you start to notice, what are the antecedents that are showing up? So like, what am I thinking? Or what were the thoughts that were going through my mind? What was I feeling? Were there certain urges? You know, were there certain like unwanted inner private experiences, you know, that were kind of going on? And you'll start to notice there's a lot of stuff that's probably showing up before the person engages in the behavior. Now, if you get sort of the idea where it's like, if this happens where it's like the behavior continues, right? So let's say the person has like a, you know, whatever, compulsion for eating ice or something, and it's like they do this, but they can't seem to stop, or they want to stop, you know, or gambling, you know, as an example, or, you know, addictions or stuff like this. Then what you'd normally see over in the third column, there's something that's reinforcing the behavior, right? And what reinforces a behavior is one thing is it often gets rid of the negative thoughts or feelings, at least temporarily. So we feel better. So it gets rid of negative thoughts and feelings. We feel better. Third thing would be, you know, it can help us escape a situation. Or the fourth thing that can be like sort of a reinforcing behavior is that it gives us attention from other people. So if you got like, you know, all four of those, if you tick the boxes, if this behavior ticks the boxes on all four of those, you get a pretty highly reinforced behavior. And, you know, this would be sort of like, you know, this could be why we do it, because I do this because it makes all this stuff go away, or it helps me feel better. You know, usually it's that kind of stuff is why we do things. But
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I put eating junk food for mine, so sort of
eating
going
junk food, yeah, for
I was
sure. I think I've put on a couple of pounds since March because it's like,
it's like,
you know, you eat food and it's like it's kind of a comfort thing, you know, it feels better. So it's like, well, that's kind of the function of the behavior.
yeah, it definitely makes you feel a little better
Why we do it.
after a good meal.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So the next question um, is, where can I look for mental health resources at Carleton?
Okay, so I think like one-stop shop, what I would tell people is if you go to carleton.ca, sorry, /wellness, / that's the Office of Student Affairs, and you will find all kinds of internal resources. You'll find external resources. You'll find things like care reports. You know, like a care report is like if you're worried about somebody, you can submit a care report, and you know people will follow up with them there if they need more support. All kinds of stuff there. That would be sort of where I would suggest people start first. There's all kinds of programs. You know, if you're looking at mindfulness programs, even workshops that we offer at Carleton in health and counseling, we'll have those kind of advertised there. Hey, I will mention that. I just kind of thought of something there. We have a whole bunch of workshops that are coming up in the winter term that people might be interested in. So I'll just kind of toss out a few of those. We're starting a working with emotions group. So this would be a great workshop if people have a lot of difficulty holding or kind of being with like negative or big feelings, things like that, have difficult managing emotions, or like interpersonal effectiveness, or things like that, where trouble being sort of in the moment, like they're living a lot in the past or kind of like a lot in the future. So that's a great workshop for that one. It's pretty in depth. We have a number of our colleagues that are putting that one together. Nathaniel Jewett, he's a counselor over in residence. I believe he's putting together a procrastination workshop. He might be actually working with Tim Pitchell on that. He's one of our, most people probably would know Tim. He's a prof at Carleton, and his specialty is known as an expert in procrastination. So Nate's kind of working with him on that a little bit. So on that website, you can look for stuff like that. You can also look on our website too, but this one is sort of like a one-stop shop for wellness and mental health at Carleton.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. It's having like a centralized space for all your sort of mental health and wellness aspects is very important. And I commend Carlton for doing that. I hope all students use it, especially when they need to. I'll just say one like quick thing from CUSA side. So Empower Me is actually a thing that is involved in your health and dental plan. It's a 24/7 mental health hotline, which connects you to local mental health counselors and therapists. It's part of your health plan again, so it's in there. It's no cost added to it. And we're proud to announce that it's accessible to international students as well now, especially because we know students might not be coming to Canada this semester. So yeah, if you need anything, it's 24/7. Please call. It's there for you. It's meant for you students to use. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, great resource. Mhm.
So we are gonna go to our next question. This question is personally very important to me. How can I support my friends and classmates who are going through a hard time right now?
Okay. So when folks come in and they, sometimes they'll ask that question, um, I usually find myself, I'll usually kind of ask them, well, if you were going through this, like, what would you want them to say to you? So how, kind of that idea, do unto others as that you would have them do unto you. It's amazing what people say, when you ask them that question. So there's a lot of things like the greatest gift you can give somebody is the quality of your attention. So just kind of like showing up and being like fully present. Um, we call this a coach state, right? So in therapy, the coach is sort of like an acronym that stands for centered, open, aware, connecting, and holding space for. This is basically you're talking about. So this is your state when you're working with somebody, and you're working with stuff that's like maybe kind of hard to hear or kind of hard to be with. But your presence is the most important thing when you're working with somebody that's having a tough time or somebody that's in distress, because they often won't remember what you say to them, but they will remember how they feel with you. So your presence is sort of one of the most important things, right? And so the coach state kind of can help you kind of get into that kind of a helpful state. Let's see, what else was I going to say on that? Yeah, with that question, I didn't have too much to add to it because every time I ask, we do a self-compassion exercise sometimes, which is, didn't mention that, but that's an incredible skill to start to cultivate, like with all of these challenges, because usually we're really tough on ourselves, we beat ourselves up. A lot of the work on self-compassion says, the opposite, where it's like we can be even more effective or kind of achieve more of our goals if we were a little bit kinder and more gentler with ourselves. So there's an exercise in self-compassion that we often do where we ask somebody, if you had a best friend and they were experiencing your problem, the same problem that you have right now, like what would you offer them in terms of words of like support or caring or kindness? It's like not necessarily about problem solving, but what would you offer them that would be supportive? And to hear the stuff that people say, it's amazing, So I think that probably not much I could add to that. I think a lot of what you would do naturally. Sometimes people are worried about saying the wrong thing, and I think sometimes it's more of a barrier to knowing what they would just do naturally, with someone. But as long as you're showing up and like you're there for them, and you can even say that, it's like, I'm here for you, it's like we're going to get through this. It's like, I'm here, I'm with you. Now, it's that idea that a person's not alone. That can go a long way. That can go a really long way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much for that. Honestly, yeah, I 100% agree. I think just letting people know sometimes that, I'm there for you regardless. I'm there to help you. Your support system is an important thing, and people sometimes overlook just how important it is just to have somebody you know is in your corner.
Yeah. Like if you're just to add to that, like going back to the question before about sort of like mental health resources, right? Like um, if the, if your friend's problem, right, is ticking the boxes on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about before, you know, so it's like, you know, if they're having like suicidal ideation, or like it's sort of like stuff that's like, you know, in terms of on the continuum of seriousness, it's like, okay, it's pretty serious. Then definitely, I mean, encouraging them to reach out, or even reaching out to help and counseling, reaching out to, you know, the office, you know, the kind of the care report even, you know, can be an interesting option through the Office of Student Affairs as well. So that's actually on that website for mental health resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that again. Yeah. Yeah, mental health resources are very important. So again, we'll be reposting this on the CUSA Instagram so people can actually see it. Hopefully get to see these mental health resources themselves. And if they need to use them, use them.
Mhm.
And now we're off to our final question of the day. Grant, thank you so much. This has been an amazing panel, and I'm excited to post this for students to see.
Cool.
Wish it didn't have to end, but it's the last question.
All right.
What are some tips on dealing with my home environment when it's busy and cramped and makes me feel stressed?
Great question. Yeah. Hearing this one a lot this time of year. So you're not alone. Whoever was asking that, not alone. Um, Okay, so we make the distinction in counseling. We make the distinction between sort of what's called primary control and secondary control. So primary control strategies are like if you can do something physically in the environment or the context or the situation that you're in, you know, to make something a little bit better. So, for example, in this situation, you know, if a lot of people are saying, you know, it's noisy, it's like, you know, I got roommates, and it's like it's hard to concentrate and that. Okay, so a primary control strategy would be you know, either kind of make a request or kind of talk to the person, kind of ask them, can you dial this down a little bit? I'm studying. That doesn't work. You got the option of like, okay, another primary control strategy would be something like maybe, you know, noise canceling headphones, earplugs, things like this. These are all sort of like primary control strategies. Um, so again, kind of going back to that idea before, it's like I always like remind people, it's like you guys are professionals. Like you guys have been in school for decades. You usually it's not a question of capability, right? It's like it's sort of like dealing with the stuff that's getting in the way. So I usually start kind of asking them, what have you done in the past? You know, when you've had that kind of a situation, what's worked for you? Because if we don't have to recreate the wheel, you know, and if they found something that's worked back then, great. Let's test it and see if it works now. But any of those, like we can get into kind of brainstorming stuff like that, you know, in a counseling session about primary control strategies. If the person has got that's not an option, then you've got secondary control strategies. And the secondary control strategies deal more with sort of like going back to that car analogy with all the different wheels on it. Um, the secondary control strategies are dealing more with like, can we change, sort of like reframe some of the thoughts about this? Can we deal with some of the stresses in terms of like the emotions that are showing up? It's just like, you know, and our mind's going, you got to study, you know, but, you know, can we put in some acceptance strategies to kind of some mindful acceptance strategies, perhaps, if we can't change the situation? These are more secondary control strategies. So if we can't do anything physically to change it. So
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you so much for that'll help. I definitely know home environments are not always the best environments
no,
over there.
no,
Personally, I live with my sister right now, and my family comes by very almost all too often.
yeah.
So I know it's sometimes feels a little stressed, a little cramped, and you always just want to have your own space sometimes. But no, thank you so much, Grant, for taking time out of your day to just speak about a lot of things that I think are very important for students, whether it's mental health resources or just tips to deal with sales depression or regular depression. And just, I think that's an amazing thing. I think students really, really should hopefully enjoy this for whoever saw it and whoever will see it very soon. And if you have any closing remarks, any tips, any tricks left, it's your floor.
I think I've said enough. But I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me, having me on. It was a lot of fun to connect and work with you guys and kind of collaborate. So anyway, I hope in the future we can do that again if people find this useful.
Mhm.
In closing remarks, I guess I would just say, oh, Bruce Lee, I think, said it well. He said, take what's useful, discard what isn't, and add to it what's uniquely your own. So if there's anything from this workshop that's useful to you, try to experiment with it. I always say to my students, life, it's an experiment. You got to try, not trial and error. It's more like trial and correction. It's like you're getting feedback, whether this stuff works or whether it doesn't for you. So thank you very much. And I wish
Awesome.
everybody a great end of term.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grant.